The Interior Systems Contractors Association of Ontario, known as Isca, was incorporated on September 1st, 1971. Originally, it was incorporated as the Drywall Association of Ontario, but in 1980 it was renamed Isca and now represents over 80 contractors and 30 suppliers and manufacturers throughout the province, who in turn employ over 10,000 members of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades and the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America. The Interior Finishing Systems Training Center is the largest drywall training center in North America. Known as the IFSTC, it trains over 300 new apprentices each year in the drywall acoustic mechanic, drywall finisher and plasterer, hazardous material worker, and the exterior insulated finishing systems mechanic trades. The IFSTC also upgrades over 6,800 journeymen a year in health and safety training and skills upgrading.
Hello and welcome to the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party's Leaders Debate, sponsored and facilitated by the Interior Systems Contractors Association of Ontario. My name is Paul Nichols and I will be your moderator for today's event. This is your opportunity to meet the candidates for the leadership of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, to hear their opinions on issues of importance to the association, its members, the entire construction industry, and its skilled tradespeople. We expect that through today's questions and vigorous debate, our audience will get a clear understanding of where each candidate stands on the issues. Bear in mind, one of these people could very well be the next Premier of Ontario. Working from the left to the right, our speaking order will be Christine Elliott, followed by Monty McNaughton, and followed by Patrick Brown. On behalf of everybody here, we wish you all the best during the debates. Let's start now with our opening statements. And Ms. Elliott, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'd particularly like to thank Isca for organizing this event, and I'm looking forward to our discussion this afternoon on issues of interest to the construction industry, which of course are directly related to our provincial economy. We know that the construction sector contributes over $2.5 billion per month to Ontario's economy, so your issues are in fact our issues, and we as politicians need to do our part to make sure that you get the support that you need for your businesses to be able to grow and thrive. I know that you have some concerns and issues I think that we'll be discussing this afternoon around prompt payment legislation, construction liens, and how to get more young people involved in your trades. But in order for us to be able to do that, we need to be able to communicate effectively with you. And of course, regrettably, that hasn't happened in the recent past. We know that some of the positions that we took in the last election in 2014 did not exactly endear us to you. And we need to fix that relationship in order that we can continue to go on together. That certainly needs to change, and I'm committed to you that if I am elected as leader of our party, that I will open up that dialogue. I will press that restart button. It will be a new day, and I will look forward to having conversations with you and building a real relationship based on mutual trust and respect. That's actually one of the reasons why I'm running for leadership of this party. We need to make sure that all of our partners are engaged in the conversations relating to our economy. And we know that right now, we're going to end up with $325 billion worth of debt by 2018. That is not sustainable. We need to build our economy, and we know that the Liberals are not going to be able to do that. We need to provide that credible alternative, and that's what I'm committed to doing. But the question is, how do we do that? After 4 successive election losses, I believe we need to change the tone and direction of our party. We need to reach out and deal with the issues that really matter to people. And to be a progressive conservative, now we need to return to our roots, being fiscally responsible, because we can't do anything without that. But we also need to be socially compassionate. We need to go out and help people who need our help. So we need to provide that credible alternative. But as I said earlier, we can't do it alone. We need your help. We need to sit down and work with you as willing partners to listen to what you have to say. Certainly, as elected leader of our party, I would want to create a construction advisory council that would involve all members in your sector to be able to provide us good advice about what you need and what's going to help you reduce red tape and get on with the work that you want to do. As Premier, we can continue with that Construction Advisory Council that was started by Premier Bill Davis many years ago and was certainly reintroduced by my late husband in 2003. That ongoing dialogue is important both for your industry and the province of Ontario, and I'm committed to continuing it and look forward to working with you. Thank you.
I'd personally like to thank Isca for hosting us this afternoon. I've had the opportunity to work with a number of you in this room over the last couple years as MPP and, of course, as the Labour critic prior to the last election, and really got to know a lot of the issues facing the construction industry. I just wanted to tell you a bit about myself and where I come from prior to politics. I was born and raised in a family business, a building supply store in southwestern Ontario. So, of course, grew up and serving customers and many contractors and skilled tradespeople in our area of southwestern Ontario. So really got a firsthand knowledge of the industry working in our family business. My brother and I own our family business now, and I've always said when I'm done with politics, I'll be back in the family business, working hard to create private sector jobs in our local area. I also wanted to mention today at Queen's Park, we had a moment of silence for a construction worker that unfortunately lost his life in the last number of days. So that was a reminder, I think, to all of us as politicians and all of us in the industry that we have to continue to work to improve health and safety standards in the province of Ontario, specifically in this industry. As well, I want to thank everyone for the contribution that you make to Ontario's economy. There's something like 435,000 people that work in the construction industry and add billions and billions of dollars every single year to Ontario's economy. So thank you for that. I'm looking forward to laying out a number of ideas that I put forward in this leadership campaign that really focuses on private sector job growth in Ontario. I think we have a Liberal government that's not focused on creating the conditions for private sector jobs to be created. As leader of our party, I want to build a new Conservative coalition here in Ontario. We do have to hit the reset start with our party. I'm focusing on reaching out and working with blue-collar workers and students, small business people. I think these are the people that we have to bring back to our party. They once held Conservative beliefs and Conservative memberships in our party, and I look forward to reaching out and bringing these people back to our fold. So again, thank you very much for the invitation to be here, and look forward to talking about the issues of importance to the construction industry this afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you, and it's great that Isca hosted this debate today. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. I'm running for the leadership of the PC party because I believe my party is broken. They haven't done a good job at listening. They haven't done a good job at consulting. We've seen the party that once governed Ontario for 42 years fall at the beginning of this leadership to 9,000 members. Think about it. And the party was in pretty rough shape. I'm glad that we've started this revitalization and we're now up to 76,000 members. But what's so important going forward is that we become a party that values listening, that builds a team through consultation. And you know, I had a supporter in Mississauga, Gurdav Gill, who gave me some advice at the beginning of this leadership, and he said, what's wrong with the PC party is that they forget that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You know, I had a young boy in Port Dover at a debate who put up his hand and said, you know what's wrong with the PC party? They keep on passing the puck in front of their own net. If a 9-year-old boy can get it, boy, our party needs to. I'm tired of seeing our party drive people away. Let's be frank. Many of you in this room probably worked pretty hard to make sure that Tim Hudak wasn't elected. I want to bring you back to the Conservative family. You know, I look at this building, I look on the walls, I see Conservative politicians from our history on your wall. But we've driven friends away. We've taken on ideological positions, whether it's right to work or on the College of Trades. We've lost a lot of friends. I want a reset in our party. I don't want the same old, same old. I don't want to tweak this or tweak that. Frankly, if you change the coat of paint, but it's all the same people, you know, you're going to get the same result. I want a real change for our party. I want to build a party that is driven by the energy of our membership. I want to build a party that values what you have to say. And obviously, this sector that has been brought together today is so valuable for Ontario. The jobs you create, the spin-off you create, is one of the reasons that Ontario has been a success story before. I want to enable you. I want to enable you to create jobs. And I think today is going to be an opportunity to talk about some of the roadblocks you face in government. And I hope that going forward, the PC party is not going to be your enemy, but the PC party will be your partner to make sure that your industry succeeds so that Ontario succeeds. And it's a privilege to take part in this debate today.
The concept of right to work figured prominently in the lead up to the last election as a means of recovering lost manufacturing jobs. There was even a white paper printed under the banner of Paths to Prosperity, Flexible Labor Markets. Critics saw it as an exercise in union busting. Can you please tell us where your thoughts and personal beliefs position you in this debate on that issue?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Look, I was a labor critic 6 months prior to the last election, and I want to thank many of you for helping me in that 6-month period, and we did convince our former leader to drop that policy prior to the last election. That's where I got to know a number of you and have really listened to a lot of advice from the industry and from private sector union leaders. Look, this is an issue I think that talks about what's wrong with our party. Our party has become very top-down, and there's nothing more that demonstrates that than coming up with ideas, whether it's this issue or faith-based funding back in 2007 or 100,000 workers being terminated in the public sector in this campaign. We have to develop a new way of creating policy. No more insiders, 2 or 3 people in downtown Toronto coming up with these ideas that lead to disastrous election results for our party. So I propose a number of changes. Number one, after this leadership's over, I want all PC party members, anyone who has a $10 membership, to come together, have a policy convention where we develop a policy booklet. This is something that really comes from the grassroots. I can tell you in 3 years prior to the last election of being MPP, the number one issue from manufacturers and from seniors and families, the number one issue in Ontario was expensive energy bills. It wasn't about right to work. They wanted a government that was going to get hydro bills down. That would be the single biggest way that we could create manufacturing jobs and other private sector jobs in Ontario. Secondly, I propose that all party members will approve the next election platform before we run on it. And I think there's nothing that demonstrates giving the party back to the membership than having all party members approve the next platform. Thank you.
I mentioned before that 9-year-old boy talked about, stop passing the puck in front of your net. There's an example of that. It was the right to work proposal put forward by the party leading up to the last election. And I realized they backed off, but I think the damage was done. I think many of you felt that you couldn't trust this party. We're gonna make sure going forward that you don't have those type of policies being driven against you. I'm gonna make sure that this is a policy consultation process that values all the stakeholders, that values all the members, and I applaud Monty for saying that he's committed to making sure that we don't ever again have a top-down policy process, and that's the sense that I'm finding in the membership across the province. I know Monty is as well. We have to build the grassroots party, and if there was ever an example of how we missed the cue, it was that proposal. So absolutely, it would not be part of the platform going forward. I would speak against it if anyone raised it in our caucus or at the policy convention. Frankly, this did pass a party policy convention, but by such a slim margin. You think you would have known. If you can barely convince your own party at a policy convention of the most devoted conservatives that this is a good idea, if the party is split on it, well, guarantee the province it's not going to be an electoral winner. So I think we need to do a better job at going back to the drawing board, and this is one of many issues that highlights how we just didn't listen.
Well, I'm not a fan of right-to-work legislation, never was, never will be. The argument is, of course, that it has been very successful in U.S. jurisdictions. Well, Canada is a very different place. So we need to not go down there, but I certainly agree with the comments that were made that by the time we did back away from it, it was too late. And we did take a very antagonistic attitude towards unions in the last election. Basically, we declared war on all unions. That was wrong. We shouldn't have done that, and certainly things would change under my leadership. You know, coming from Whitby, Oshawa, as I do, the unions have always been a very strong presence. The CAW, now Inter4 Union, many union members have been supportive of us as a party. My grandfather was a member of the CAW. He was an auto mechanic on the line at General Motors. We have a proud history of working with unions where I come from, and I certainly want to continue that. But we do have to press the reset button. We do have to start that collaborative relationship. So that's why, as leader, I would invite you all to become involved in our policy advisory committees, on our construction advisory committee, to make recommendations about what's actually going to work in your construction industry. And what happened in the last couple of elections was the fact that we ended up being blindsided by some policies that came down from on high by a group of people that I'm pretty sure didn't knock on doors, because if they did, they would have known how wrong those ideas were. And I'm sure they didn't consult with you. So it all points to the need to be collaborative, to make sure that we can engage in that respectful relationship. Will we agree on everything every single time? No. But I think that if we build that relationship based on respect, then we'll be able to weather the storm and agree to disagree from time to time. But for the most part, we'll all be working together to make sure that your construction industry remains strong and that Ontario's economy continues to grow. So I certainly look forward to that opportunity. Thank you.
More than 434,000 or 435,000, but let's just assume there's a lot of Ontarians earning their living in the construction industry, yet many of the small and medium-sized family-owned contractors who employ these people are not getting paid for several months after the fact for certified, completed construction work. As leader, will you commit to making prompt payment legislation a priority in your campaign platform when elected premier? Will you commit to delivering prompt payment legislation within the first year? The first to speak to this question will be Patrick Brown. Mr. Brown.
Unequivocally, it would be something that I would push as premier, as something unequivocally something that I think would be of benefit to Ontario. Actually, I've been working on it in Ottawa as well, working with many of you, along with Maxime Bernier, who is a minister from Quebec who sees the real value in it, and we've been petitioning the federal government to sort of set an example, and in the months ahead we'll find out if we've been successful in our lobbying campaign, but I think prompt payment legislation would unequivocally be to the benefit of Ontario, and something that I would be very proud to do within my first year as premier.
Yes, I would support prompt payment legislation as well. We did support it when it was brought forward in the last session by Mr. Del Duca, and two of my colleagues who are helping me in this campaign, both Todd Smith and Steve Clark, have indicated that they would be willing to reintroduce it as private members' bills. We know that it's important for all of you to be paid. Everyone deserves to be paid promptly for the work that we do, for the work that you do, and that we should make sure that it's fair for everyone so that you can continue your enterprise. But we do know that there are some large contractors, but also the province and several municipalities have been a little bit reluctant to come forward with this legislation. Certainly, as far as government is concerned, as leader of our party and ultimately premier, I would want to make sure that all provincial contracts are acknowledged and paid for within a reasonable period of time, and that we work with municipalities as well. So I think there's room for discussion there about the timing, the extension, and so on, making sure that you get paid in a prompt period of time. But the total concept of prompt payment legislation is something absolutely we support, and we know how important it is for your industry.
Well, this is a great question, and obviously a very topical within the construction industry. I've been leading the charge on behalf of our caucus over the last couple of years on prompt payment. I've been up a number of times challenging Kathleen Wynne as to why she wasn't making Steve Del Duca's bill law. From a small business perspective, I know what it's like when you're not paid on time, and I remember throughout the committee hearings on this bill and working with stakeholders, listening to a number of small business people who weren't paid from school boards or local municipalities for 120 days. Again, coming from a small business background, I know that that stretches the cash flow and is very challenging. So that's why I've committed to prompt payment legislation. And it's something that this government actually should be moving on immediately, because there is all party support for this legislation.
When you're elected to Premier, will you commit to delivering prompt payment legislation within the first year? And what we'll do is we'll just go back and we'll start with Mr. Brown and let you.
I thought I said yes and add in the word that I would be proud to do that as Premier within my first year.
Okay. Ms. Elliott?
Yes, absolutely I would, because we know how important the construction industry is to Ontario's economy, $2.5 billion a month. It's essential that we would do whatever we can to support you, so yes, I would.
Yes, and also, again, just to reiterate, I think it should be done before the next election. So as leader of our party, I would ensure that our party member supports a government bill if it's brought forward.
All of you seem to be saying that it's time to stop going to war with private sector unions and start being more inclusive when it comes to opening dialogue and consultations. Many of us in this room, including union representatives, are conservatives, but have felt alienated by successive attacks in recent years. How do you plan to start building bridges again and regain a lot of lost trust? First person to speak to this will be Ms. Elliott.
Well, we did make a big mistake the last election, although it goes back further than that. I think it's fair to say that we haven't had that respectful relationship. We did basically declare war on all unions, both public and private sector. For whatever reason, I don't know. I think it was wrong-headed. We should not have done it, and that's why it's important to restart that relationship based on that trust, based on that respect. But we can't do it without starting, as we are starting now, and making sure that we are able to engage in that kind of a dialogue. I like to build on consensus. As a leader, that's my leadership style. I do have a track record. I brought forward 2 private members' bills at Queen's Park that resulted in select committees, one on mental health and addictions, one on developmental services. I realize they're entirely different topics, but I was able to work with the Liberals and the NDP to come up with reports that we wrote together based on the fact that we sat back and listened to what each other had to say. And for those of you who watch Question Period, you probably know that's a rare and wonderful thing to get all 3 parties working together. But that's the style that I like to bring. I don't like to come forward with preconceived notions about what I think things should be from an ideological basis. I'm a problem solver. That's the background I came from as a lawyer. That's the background I work with as an MPP. I want to find real solutions to the real problems that you're faced with in your industry to make sure your businesses can grow and thrive. I'm there to listen. I know I don't know everything, but I know that there's a lot of knowledge and experience here in this room that can offer some good practical suggestions as to what we should do to turn things around for Ontario's economy and make your particular industry even stronger. So I would say I'm more than happy to sit down and work with you on the basis of that collegiality, consensus-based decision-making, and ultimately respect.
Look, I do think over the last 20 years, our party continues to alienate a number of people within Ontario, and that's why we've not won government since 1999. I've said I want to build a new Conservative coalition in Ontario, and that means blue-collar workers, private sector union members, small businesses, students. We need to attract more people to our party. And as many of you in this room know, I've been working with you closely over the last couple of years, getting to understand some of your issues. And it's interesting that I find that a lot of your members are conservative-minded. They have conservative values, and they think government should be living within its means. And we know in Ontario, when you have a $300 billion debt, when you have electricity prices going through the roof, when you have more costs forced upon your businesses and on your industry, that it's driving jobs out of Ontario, and that's not how we're going to create private sector jobs in Ontario. That's why I made the focus of my campaign on getting government living within its means and really creating a strong economy so private sector jobs can be created and the cost of doing business in Ontario can be lowered so we can all succeed.
Thank you, and agree with the sentiments expressed by Ms. Elliott and by Mr. McNaughton. I agree. Our party has fallen off track. This World War III type attitude with both private and public sector unions obviously was a recipe for disaster. I think you can achieve more by listening, by consultation, by consensus. And I look at a lot of the groups that have supported Conservative victories in the past, both provincially and federally. And quite often when Conservatives have formed government, they have had the backing of both private and public sector unions. I don't believe it's a contradiction in being a proud progressive Conservative and at the same time having strong relationships with both private and public sector unions. I can tell you at my campaign launch in Barrie, Ontario, some many months ago, this has been a long leadership campaign, October, I had three unions there speaking at my campaign launch. And I did that intentionally to send a message. This can't be the same old PC party that tries to make our enemy the broader private and public sector unions. I want to build, as Monty says, I think it's a good term, a new Conservative coalition, and it's one that we want you to be part of.
This next question hits at the heart of a friend of mine, David Sabucci, so we'll come back to this. As the Ontario College of Trades was created to give tradespeople the ability to govern themselves, like doctors, nurses, travel, and real estate agents. It's about less government, a model that the Progressive Conservatives have always supported until Tim Hudak promised, if elected, to abolish the college. When elected leader, what will you do with respect to the Ontario College of Trades? The first to speak to this will be Mr. McNaughton.
Many professions are self-regulated, and the trades shouldn't be any different. I'm not running on abolishing the College of Trades. I think there's a review being undertaken, and I think that we can fix it, but we don't have to abolish it. And that's my position. I know it's a different path than what we're on in the past, but is one that I think 4 years down the road I'd be proud to support.
I have the same sentiment as Monty on this. There are many professions that are self-regulated. And frankly, if you look at the model adopted when the Progressive Conservatives were in office, I think in the example of the College of Teachers, it was a conservative move. It was a conservative change. And Dave Tabucci himself is a former Progressive Conservative cabinet minister. So the review that is underway, I think, is important. And obviously, we should wait for the sense of what's to come from that review. But I think my advice, and if I was leader of the party, I would say we shouldn't prejudge that report, and we should look at ways, rather than abolishment, but to actually fix it. And appreciate that Monty's coming from the same perspective on that.
Well, I don't think you'll find any disagreement among us on this issue. We did oppose the creation of the College of Trades, but I think upon reflection, when you understand how it is to help with the self-regulation of members, it makes sense to me. Being a member of the Law Society of Upper Canada, I think that it could operate very much the same way. It has been created. I wouldn't take any steps to abolish it. I think we do need to continue to look at ways that it can continue to enhance your sector and wait for the report that's going to come up with those ideas. So I don't think we need to do anything. I would not do anything to change or abolish it. I think that we need to look at ways that it can continue to support your members.
The underground economy has grown to more than $41 billion, according to Statistics Canada, with about 1/3 of that attributed to the construction industry. Can you please tell us what you would do as a leader to fight against this growing problem? And first to speak to this will be Mr. Brown.
Thank you. And I think it is a problem, and it's actually a growing problem. If you look at the Stats Canada reports, you're seeing specifically in the construction sector a greater level of the underground economy, and the net loser is government. It's the broader taxpayer. And so I think there's two things that need to be looked at. One is independent operators who are being contracted out, and I think there's a growing sort of loophole towards that. And secondly, obviously, enforcement. So there's going to have to be a greater level of enforcement for that type of evasion.
Well, we do know there is a huge problem with the underground economy, with the $41 billion lost per year, and about 30% of that, I think, comes from the construction industry. So we know that it prevents you from being competitive in some of the contracts that you bid for, that you're competing against organizations that don't offer benefits, that only offer contract positions, and it makes you less competitive and therefore not able to compete for those kinds of businesses. But over and above your industry, of course, it hurts the provincial economy as well. So we do need to look at enforcement. We do need to look at ways that we can prevent that from happening. It's in everyone's best interest, but again, I think that speaks to the need for us to work together, for you to help us to understand what's going to make the most difference and help us to find ways in order to combat that. It is a two-way partnership, so we look forward to your ideas.
Mr. McDonald.
Well, it is important that there's a level playing field here in Ontario, and we're seeing when there's a $41 billion underground economy, obviously there's not a level playing field happening in the province. My take is maybe a bit different. I think that this government tends to force a lot of people into the underground economy and a lot of business people into the underground economy. I mean, every single time you turn around, they're increasing taxes in the province, whether it's a carbon tax that we're likely going to see in the months ahead, or small business tax increases, income tax increases, or there's new fees every time you turn around. I think we need to make Ontario competitive again. We need to get government living within its means, and that'll stop government from always increasing costs to business people here in the province of Ontario. One of the things, and there may be some disagreement in the room on this, but one of the things that's really going to hurt the Ontario economy and people in our industry is the new ORPP that the Liberals are bringing in. So if you make $45,000 per year, you're going to have to cut the Liberals a check for $800. The business is going to have to also contribute $800. That's $1,600 out of the economy for someone making $45,000 per year. And worst of all, someone 40 and over will never receive maximum benefit from the ORPP. So the Liberals really are going to pool billions and billions of dollars for a generation before they pay out that benefit to people in Ontario. So it's initiatives like this and the carbon tax that are going to make the underground economy even worse in Ontario.
When elected leader, would you commit to ensuring that on government construction projects, that contractors would be required to prove that they invest in training by hiring apprentices according to the legislated ratios? So the first to speak to this will be Ms. Elliott.
Yes, I think it's really important that we make sure that everyone is investing in training. We know that you invest disproportionately to a lot of other groups. I know, for example, the Carpenters Union has 14 training centers across the province of Ontario. You have a wonderful training center right here that I hope to have the opportunity to tour someday in the near future. But it is really important that it be fair for everyone, that everyone has an obligation to contribute to that training. So we would certainly want to be assisting with government with training. In some cases, it might be direct grants to some of the Red Seal trades, but I think in your business, it's looking at helping you with some of your costs in training, so it does create that level playing field. Training is so important. We know that you invest so much, you get some of your apprentices poached when they're about 80% through their training. That's not fair. That's not a good investment for you. Everyone needs to contribute, and they shouldn't be relying on you exclusively to be able to do that training.
Well, I think it's a very worthwhile suggestion and something as leader of our party and as premier that I would certainly consider. I have had the wonderful opportunity over the last couple of years to attend many of your training facilities throughout the province of Ontario, whether I'm down in Windsor or up in Thunder Bay and across the GTA, and just commend you on the training programs that you deliver for your people. And I remember being here at Isca for the very first time, and Hugh Laird saying to me, one of the things that the apprentices learn here is that, or one of the values of coming here for training is the fact that they start at 7 or 8 in the morning and they go till the end of the day, where I took from that, and it was my opinion that in the college system, that you're at the whim of that professor. So at least, it's hands-on. It's like a real work day here. So I commend you for the training facilities that you provide right across the province of Ontario.
Thank you. And certainly it's a worthwhile suggestion and one that I think has a lot of merit. I too have toured a lot of the training facilities around the province, and we have a huge shortage of training, and if government can be a tool to encourage that, then I think that's a path we should follow. I would say that for members of our caucus, I think they would all be well served to visit some of these training facilities, because as Monty says, you see very vividly how effective they are and what great use they are. And I agree that I know the question's more of a statement to see the type of direction we're going, but I certainly think that's the type of suggestion we should take to our party membership.
I came here today specifically to ask a question about the reinstatement of the Construction Industry Advisory Board. I know back in the day under Premier Bill Davis and Betty Davison, I believe, was the labor minister at the time. They established this advisory board at the time, and they put private industry stakeholders on it from across the different industries in the construction industry in Ontario. And they came up with things like province-wide bargaining, things that made sense for the construction industry in Ontario. It was a great area so they could feed into the minister, feed into the government, the issues that they wanted them to concentrate on in the construction industry. That worked well up until Bob Ray came along and he quashed it all. And yes, your late husband did reinstate it, and it's been quashed again. What I'm asking, I've heard you, Christine, say that you would reinstate that, and I appreciate that very much. But I haven't heard the other two candidates say they'd do it. But we don't only want an industry advisory board. We want a board that's going to be able to make recommendations to the government that will have some substance, that will carry somewhere. Because we're the private sector. We know what's going on out there every day. And we want to be able to make recommendations that we know will be listened to and acted upon. So I'd like to hear from the other two candidates. Thank you.
I think there needs to be that in place and a real formal channel between labor and government. And I just wanted to say more on a lighter note, Joe, that my best sign installer in the last election campaign was a Boilermaker. You have lots of members in southwestern Ontario, especially in my riding of Lambton, Kent, Middlesex, near Sarnia. So yes, in short, to your question, again, there needs to be that formal channel in place.
Yeah, I think we have consensus here. Absolutely, I would support the reinstatement of that advisory council, and you won't see me trying to protect the legacy of Bob Ray by continuing his work of stopping having that pipeline of advice from the construction industry. I think it would be of great service to the province of Ontario, and one of the things that we would do within our first year.
Premier Davis, who I'm very proud to say is supporting me, had a great leadership style, I think very collaborative. Didn't necessarily just bring together people who always agreed with him. I think that's a healthy dialogue, because you can't make good decisions unless you hear all sides of a discussion. So I would look forward to having that council reinstated and making sure we don't just pay lip service to it just to say, we're going to do this to mollify you guys. No, it has to come forward with real positive suggestions that we can actually act on.
Our question in the development industry, although it's a long and important one, when your party last was the governing party, your leader, Mike Harris, initiated the Oak Ridges Moraine Act, which froze 800,000 acres of land in the GTA. The Liberals then formed a government and immediately added 1 million acres to the moraine, making up the Greenbelt. They then adopted the provincial growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, directing where growth is to occur and directing municipalities to collectively plan for an additional 4 million new people and 2 million new employment opportunities. The result of the foregoing created a constraint in the supply, in which caused the price of housing to increase. This year, the Greenbelt is under review, and it is suggested that the Greenbelt will be expanded by the current government by an additional 1 million acres due to some commitments to environmental defense, which, depending on where it is frozen, could cause an additional supply chain. What is your position on revisiting the Greenbelt with a view of relieving supply constraints in our Greater Golden Horseshoe, and hopefully providing my children an opportunity to afford a house, which I'm living in right now? Thank you.
Oppose the latest suggestion by the Liberals to add 1 million acres. It is Yeah, the reality is it is tougher and tougher to buy a home in Ontario, and they're going to make it more difficult. You know, there was a Toronto Star article, and I normally don't recommend reading the Toronto Star, but in this case, I was reading the Toronto Star, and they had an article about housing prices, and there was an article that said the average house price in Toronto was, or GTA was over $1 million. How does a young person afford a house at $1 million? And the fact that you're going to drive prices up by limiting supply is not in the best interest of Ontario. And that's the lens that we have to look at as the Progressive Conservative Party. What's in the best interest of Ontario? What's in the best interest of Ontario families? And this latest talk is not in the best interest of Ontario, and so we would vehemently oppose it.
Well, I certainly would not support any expansion of the Greenbelt. In fact, I think the legislation, when it came forward in 2005, was fundamentally flawed. And I have some experience with it in my own riding, Whitby, Oshawa, and Ajax, of course, where the decisions on the Greenbelt seem to be based on political science, not on actual science. We know it's a serious problem, both for developers, also for farmers, many of whom I've represented in my law practice. So as a result of that, we've got decisions that are really limiting growth, diminishing property values, and if we expand it anymore, we create even further problems with this leapfrogging effect, where you have to build homes further and further away from the GTHA. We cannot support that because of the gridlock that comes with that, the family disruption, and the economic disruption to your industry and others. So we really need to take a hard look at it, not with a view to expanding it, but to making sure that it actually makes sense in the areas where it can, where it should be. But I think the other thing that I would say is that when you make decisions that are based on everyone's best interests, which the Liberals claim the Greenbelt was meant to be, then I think it's become expropriation without compensation. If everyone is meant to be able to benefit from it, then everybody should pay for it. So we need to build in some kind of a formula in places where Greenbelt has been brought forward to make sure that that diminution in value is accounted for to the individual landowner.
It's interesting. I remember as the economic development critic after the 2011 election, meeting with people in the construction industry, and hearing the statistics about the rise in property values and what the supply issues, how that was causing prices to go up, and unaffordability issues in the GTA. So I certainly agree with my colleagues. One other thing I would like to add, though, this government uses the environment as a political tool, and there are a number of issues across the province, whether it's the wind energy and the wind turbines down in my area, but here it's the Greenbelt. And I think that they need to, like Christine said, start looking at this from an affordability issue, not a political science standpoint. So we're in general agreement on this issue.
Closing remarks will be given in the reverse order to opening statements and will be up to 2 minutes. And the first to speak will be Patrick Brown.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to attend here today. I said at the beginning of the debate that we need to do a better job at listening and consulting, and I'd actually come here to Isca before for the purpose of listening and consulting. I value this industry. I've got two supporters in my riding, Pete McBride and Howie Campbell, who have had a history of involvement in your industry, and they said, you know what, if you sit down, and this is a very reasonable industry that just wants to grow Ontario's economy, and that's what I found as I've toured the province. I want to build a different type of PC party, and one that I want you to be part of. I want to build a PC party that is based on a team. You look at the hockey teams that lose, they all play as individuals. The ones that succeed play as a team. And I want to value the input of caucus, our candidates, the grassroots. And I actually want to bring a thoughtful approach to every piece of government legislation. I said last time, when we announced we were going to vote against the provincial budget before we even read it, it was wrong. I actually believe that we should be the party that says anything that benefits Ontario we will support, regardless of where that idea originates. If it's an NDP idea, if it's a Liberal idea, if it makes sense for Ontario, we'll champion it. If it's not in the best interest of Ontario, we'll vote against it. But the notion everything the other guys do is horrible, everything we do is perfect, isn't sincere, it's not authentic. And I want to go and say, there's no monopoly on a good idea. And we will be a party that pushes what is right. As Monty said earlier tonight, if the Liberals put forward a bill on prompt payment, we'll support it. That's the type of approach we should take in politics. It's about getting stuff done for Ontario. And I think a renewed and revitalized PC party with those principles and that approach, will find a large audience in this province. Because I think on the big issues, on the issues of job creation, on the issue of hydro prices, on the issues of integrity in government, people want change at Queen's Park. But our party scared them away. It's about fixing our party so we can serve the province of Ontario, and I appreciate your consideration today.
Great. Well, thank you to Isca for hosting this today. Beautiful facility and a great place for a gathering like this. And thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy day to come. As I said in my opening, I really do want to build a new Conservative coalition in Ontario. It's about reaching out, attracting people to our party. Our party needs to change in the way in which it develops policy. That's been our biggest problem over the last 20 years. That's why I'm proposing to have all party members to approve the next election platform before we actually campaign on it. For me, it's about giving the party back to the members. So I encourage all of you and your co-workers to please purchase a membership in the PC party. Be a part of that process in this rebuilding that's about to take place. Ontario does need change. There's no doubt about it. I meet lifelong Liberals every day who are very disenfranchised, very disappointed in the direction that Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne have taken this province. Look, it's unsustainable, the path we're on. We have a $300 billion debt in the province of Ontario today. But what's even scarier than that, in 3 years, that's going to go up by about $40 billion. I have a 20-month-old daughter. I want to leave Ontario a better place for her than we found it. And I think that's the goal of every politician, or has to be the goal of every politician in Ontario, regardless of political stripe. So I'm running to rebuild this party, to reach out, build a new Conservative coalition in Ontario, and ask you to be a part of that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you today. I really appreciate our discussion. I think we've had a good airing of a number of issues, and I appreciate your very thoughtful questions. I think that I hope that we'll have the opportunity to continue in the same spirit going forward, hopefully as leader of the PC party. But I'm running for PC leader because I'm really worried about what's happening to Ontario's economy. $325 billion worth of debt is a very frightening thought. And even more than that, I'm worried about what's going to happen to our children. I have 3 24-year-old sons. They and their friends are all looking for jobs, and we're not providing them with this government. We need to look out and figure out how we're going to turn our economy around. And I believe that I have the skills, the knowledge, and experience to be able to contribute to that, and particularly working with your industry. For those of you who don't know, I worked for almost 5 years for one of Canada's largest banks in their international area, both internationally and domestically. And I really had the opportunity to see how the international economy works and Ontario's place within it. But I've also had the experience of 25 years of practicing law, particularly in real estate, so I'm certainly very familiar with the issues that you're all concerned about. I come from that background as a problem solver. In my legal practice in the past, people would come and pay me to find solutions for them. I view my role as an MPP, as potential leader and potential premier of the province of Ontario, in very much the same way. You, as members and as taxpayers of Ontario, pay my salary to find solutions to the real problems that are facing Ontario and its people. That's the same kind of rigor that I would want to bring forward as PC party leader. And I believe I have demonstrated my ability to work collaboratively with other people, with the other 2 parties in the legislature and other stakeholder groups, which I would absolutely commit to continuing with you, because we cannot do this alone. I'm told by my 3 sons all the time that I don't have all the answers, and I understand that very well. Only working together can we turn Ontario's economy around and make Ontario first in Canada again. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your participation today.